I'm Rick, the Fat Man GM. I am your GM, your game master for the day. I have 40 years of experience. I began playing when I was 12 years old, and my experience runs from old Dungeons and Dragons through Star Wars and BattleTech, Shadowrun, and a slew of others. It's always been my philosophy that role-playing games and tabletop board games, gaming as a social medium is a great way for all walks of life to come together and enjoy camaraderie and exploring and stepping out of our comfort zone, if you will. So, this is your place at the table.
Well, my friends, this is the source book, The Triangle, from FASA'a Star Trek, the role-playing game, circa late 80s, early 90s. Let's take a look here for a second. 1985, I believe. Hard to read those sometimes. I mean, they a couple different numbers. So, the principle here is this is a source book for the general area known as the Triangle. The Triangle is this independent region where, with the Romulans on one side, the Klingons on another side, and the Federation on a third side. So it's an area that's been hotly contested for hundreds of years between the Klingons and the Romulans to begin with, and then in later years by the Federation. And the area within it is populated by a number of little independent star nations, if you will, and a lot of independent planets. Some of these planets have been settled by Romulans, some by Klingons, some by the Federation. They've been fought over and contested for quite a few years. At the same time, there's been no serious concentrated effort by the three powers to gobble up any significant portion of the Triangle, because in some aspects, there's three different reasons for doing this or for not having done this, and there's distinct advantages for all three of them. For starters, it is their version of Switzerland, for example. You have this neutral territory, if you will, that a lot of things can be negotiated and trade can be conducted, and intermediaries can act between the different major players. Now, the primary reasons that's given by the books is that, for start, the Romulans are a resource-poor interstellar kingdom. They don't have the finances or the material resources to really heavily concentrate on dominating anything, to be truthful. And in some cases, it's just by trickery and aggressiveness and their mysterious type of personality as they present themselves to their opponents that's kept them from being rolled over at some point. They put up an awful fight, but they often, in the process, decimate their forces. They deplete their reserve stockpiles fairly quickly. The Klingons are always aggressive, always looking for an advantage, but they also have a tendency to be outmaneuvered and outwitted by their opponents in a number of situations. It's also a lot of infighting and dominant behavior in the Klingon Empire that prevents them from having these concentrated efforts to claim space in a very contested area. It's easier for them to focus on other parts of their borders to attempt to expand their influences there. The Federation has a completely different philosophy, of course. They are not, they claim to not be imperial bent, that they're not out to basically conquer all of known space, but they have a very, I don't want to call it nefarious method, but they have a very slick method that they just keep progressively pushing into areas that they don't control, and eventually they gain control of it. Whether it's they encourage existing races and small stellar powers to join with the Federation, or they just outpopulate their opponents. I think that's a common thread with humanity in general, is that we're prodigious we populate pretty fast, I think, and it's one of the powers the Federation doesn't uh, put out there, if you will. So that's the general information and the idea of why this area exists. And there's a lot of adventure potential here. So you can encounter the Klingons and the Romulans and or Federation from any side that you choose to play, and compete against them or interact with them without being in a totally sphere-dominated area, i.e. Romulans trying to operate within the Klingon Empire and vice versa kind of thing. So there's a different set of dynamics here. And at no point elsewhere in the alpha quadrant, if you will, that this sort of alignment takes place. There's other locations where other starfaring empires have butts up against the Federation or the Klingons or the Romulans, but usually it's a one-on-one, and there's handfuls. They might have a neutral zone. They might have a handful of accepted trade worlds and things like that, but it's rare in the game environment to find this scenario, which is why it gets capped in. So we got our introduction to it, our brief history of the triangle, which I've kind of talked about a little bit. Before the Federation came along, the Romulans and the Klingons eventually pushed their borders to the point where they meet. The southern border is always in contest. This area here, because of the lack of resources and some of these planets being more hostile than what they're not other than this controlling territory, they really don't have a lot of value in the triangle for either one to push hard enough to waste those resources in open conflict over and over and over again. Although there's lots of skirmishes, lots of small combat. It's only in the last 100 years that the Federation has pushed into this section of the galaxy where they've come in contest with both groups at the same time. So that's what basically they're talking about here. We have a timeline of the triangle history. We have the overview position from the United Federation of Planets, the overview of the Klingon Empire, including their economic and political policies. The Federation believes in a free market policy. Thus, most companies and corporations have a free rein to do what they wish within the boundaries of the law. Trade flourishes in the triangle as traders are considered to be the backbone of free society. And then we go over here to the Klingons and their economic political policies. Klingons are very strict in their trade policies in most areas along the triangle. Most planets are open to independent traders who have been screened by the Empire. The screening takes the form of being allowed to trade on non-military planets with little interference. The trader does not cause any problems, therefore gains the trust of the Klingon customs officials. He will generally be allowed to start trading on a limited basis with pretty well any planet he chooses. As it is also well established policy, unofficial, of course, that the more grease you apply to the palms in the way of bribes, free goods, and so forth, the more this process can be speeded up. So we can see the obvious differences here. Then we go and we'll look at the Romulan Star Empire's version in their economic policy. The border worlds of the triangular that are held by the Romulans act as their economic interface with the governments of the triangle. To maintain trade, the Romulans must reluctantly allow some softening their traditional hardline stance against alien vessels in Romulan space. Long-held prejudice on both sides prevent open trade with the UFP, but smugglers are smugglers in any culture, and the Star Empire makes use of these whenever possible. So once again, it's advantageous for the Romulans to not try to dominate the triangle, just like it's advantageous for the Klingons to not do so. Now we have this area of space where traders can come from all three empires and get together, do business, and then they benefit this way. So there's good reasons for not pushing it. And now within the triangle itself, we have a number of independent nation states. We have the affiliation of outer free worlds was set up by Lieutenant Lawrence Baker of Starfleet was back in the day, and a number of planets that belong, and they go into some quite detailed history of the planet of the alliance and the planets and how they operate and how they view themselves, how they progress. Then we have the Orion Frontier Mercantile Association. This is more of a loose collection of colonies and companies that are Orion controlled, and they, for obvious reasons, they're the early versions of the Free. These are the most prolific traders, and pirates in existence up until we start discovering the Ferengi and some of the other races later in the TV series, the various TV series. And then we have the Imperial Klingon states. This was a setup of some outcasts from the Empire who got enough power together to entrench themselves, so they're really tough to dig out. And their intentions and long-term goals is to destabilize the Klingon Empire and to try to regain control or gain control of it. In some aspects, it's Taiwan to the to the China. The Klingons being the Chinese, and the Imperial States being the Taiwanese. At the end of the day, they really don't stand a chance if a really concerted effort was brought against them. The Mantive Colonial Association, and those are the four major groups. And then there's lots of independent planets. And this would be the Triangle Atlas, World Law, Gazetters. The Gazetters provided at the end of this book index these worlds in various ways, just alphabet, blah, 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 undeveloped worlds. Merely because only 120 worlds are described in detail here, this does not imply that there are only 120 worlds of consequence in the triangle. Far from it. That's to give us an open sandbox option. This allows the individual GM to come along and create additional worlds that can be utilized within the triangle. So for the most part, this is what the bulk of the rest of this source book is at this point. Is there's 120 pre-generated worlds under various control, various governments, and you got your stats on them, and a general biography of the planet itself and some notes of interest, so on and so forth. We have a few variant maps in here. This is a time travel scales for movement through space based off your warp scale. Yet another map. Ryan Frontier, exactly. Personnel Association. So I know we got a section on personalities. These, like here is the current leader of the Baker's. They call it Baker's Dozen, but Kelly inherited her blonde hair, blue eyes, some petite good looks from her late mother. The only child of William J.F. Baker, heir apparent to the Baker political dynasty, etc., etc. So we get personal biography, distinguishing physical characteristics, personality traits, and any specific knowledge or powers. And it goes through here. So we got a nice collection of NPCs to interact with in the triangle. So in a short, they give you a lot of working information. They don't give you an overwhelming amount of a political backstory and motivations for this, that, or the other thing. They leave that up to the GM, the individual GM and players to concoct a few alien races in here, establishing trade routes, corporate profiles. This is something that gets played down in the TV series and movies, but every now and then you'll hear a reference to a company or a corporation. And typical, it is these economic power blocks. It is the Federation's answer to specifically the human faction and the Terralite faction, because the Terralite's a huge merchant class mindset race, are equivalent to the Ferengi and the Orions. So, the game mastering, some basic information for how to run the black market. We're back to that political affiliation index, alphabetical index, export index, personality index, independent worlds. So this would be the Triangle source book.